January 20th, 2025, Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Through thousands of little radiating devices, tiny windows into and out of reality, Trump's second presidential inauguration is broadcast to the world. It is televised, scrutinized, analyzed, and commentated over, shared and reshared, scrolled past, and given pause. Elon Musk, now a partner in Trump's administration, performs a now infamous Roman salute, as he described. Then he performs another. On Edmonton's White Avenue, there's a tiny bar with a wooden door painted the colors of a pride flag. As Musk's pale face pokes through a kaleidoscope of minuscule glowing screens, a single accusatory voice mutters, "If it steps like a goose." They watch and rewatch, and it's not going away. January 20th, 2025, Washington, D.C., USA. On day one of his second term as president, Donald Trump signs over 20 executive orders. Among them was an adoption of an official two-gender policy and the dissolution of diversity, equity, and inclusion at the federal level. In a rush to align itself with, in Trump's words, a colorblind and merit-based America, the CDC and other research institutions began scraping published documents, purging entries, amending reports, and freezing research funding, all largely based on a set of blanket ban keywords rather than academic evidence. Queer and trans people across the world brace against a familiar feeling, one that reaches across the border and at least as far north as Edmonton, Alberta. Another red flag in the rainbow. I spoke with Morgan Evans to better understand what exactly is familiar about it. She's a historian whose work is largely based in collecting the stowed photographs, newspaper clippings, footnotes, and tape footage to help piece together and verify queer and transgender history. History doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. And, according to Evans, along with a healthy pile of background research, including documents from the Birkbeck University of London, it rhymes with the 1933 Weimar Republic book burnings. May 6, 1933, Berlin, Germany. Entire institutions are occupied, disassembled, and gradually thrown into the street, including the Institute of Sexology in Berlin. 4 days from this date, tens of thousands of books will be stacked into pyres across more than 30 university towns. The Institute was among the first to be occupied and the first to burn. The Institute of Sexology in Berlin had been pioneering research surrounding who would be described today as queer and transgender people. Founded in 1919 by Magnus Hirschfeld, a gay and Jewish man, the IOS had also served as an interdisciplinary sexual health clinic and education center. It was an advocacy and community support space. It was a marriage counseling center and an addictions treatment resource. It was a space that asked about sexual liberation and a place that began asking big questions about gender, about natural order and identity. And it was these big questions that sealed the fate of the Institute as an enemy of the state. Evans isn't one to draw cheap, tactless parallels to Nazi Germany. Like most European immigrant families from that era, hers was directly impacted by the Nazi regime. With no minced words, she also sees the trouble on the horizon. While there's no smoke and, so far, no fire, a digital book burning has indeed begun here in 2025. It's epistemicide, said Evans, the erasure of an entire way of knowing. This particular brand of anti-queer and anti-trans fascism is, despite the tariff situation, something that Canadians have been importing in real time. Albertans, in particular, as advocacy and human rights organizations, are poised to take the province to court over anti-2S LGBTQIA+ legislation. It's not just locked to the sphere of politics either. Hate crimes affecting queer and trans people have been steadily increasing according to reports collected by StatsCan, with a 69% rise from 2022 to 2023 in hate crimes specifically targeting sexual orientation and more than doubling since 2020 based on gender expression.
I feel like I've almost been preparing for times like this my whole life.
Ray Madge is a program coordinator at the University of Alberta's Firefly Institute, whose work centralizes Indigenous ways of knowing and decolonizing sexual and gender diversity. They feel that the Trump administration's policing of gender and sexuality in research sets an extremely dangerous precedent for 2S LGBTQIA+ people and also puts a significant dent in the premise of research and knowledge as a whole. While the White House has repealed its recognitions of so-called gender ideology, Madge said that the actual research has been pointing the other way, anthropologically, sociologically, and biologically for a long time, even before 1919.
When we have huge political leaders making statements that, the only genders are male and female, and it's just not the truth. Saying something like that doesn't change the fact that we exist, but it does give people the words to justify harm and hurt with our community. And I think the thing that's really tough for me in sort of being against research is that, those of us who are supportive of queer and trans rights have a lot of evidence on our side. And I think that if the gender binary was as innate as these people think it is, then it wouldn't need to be policed and it wouldn't need to be hidden. They're afraid of the evidence. They're afraid of what researchers find because people who do research into this work find the truth, which is that queer and trans people have always existed, will always exist.
Blaise Bennett is a photojournalist and longtime advocate for queer and transgender rights. They said that these cultural imports from the States usually turn around within 8 to 10 years within our own borders, but recently things have escalated and accelerated as the lines began to blur between Canadian and American politics sometime in 2016. They see a CDC data scrub as a dangerous marker of anti-queer and anti-trans erasure and suspects Alberta will follow suit.
This is how it starts. Once you start seeing somebody as less than human or not deserving of certain rights, I remember this fight. I was there the first time.
People living in marginalia, at the bottom of power structures, are often targeted first, said Bennett. People on the intersectional lines of queer, transgender, Black, Indigenous, and/or disabled, any group of marginalized people, can become a target. They become the scapegoats for society's problems, said Bennett, despite being demographics that are overwhelmingly in the minority. They're being used as a diversionary tactic, Bennett said, to distract the majority public from larger issues and unite them to certain political ends.
They are censoring and erasing trans people from public life. Anybody they don't like is being demonized, dehumanized, and vilified because it's always the trans and disabled communities that are targeted first. Get rid of the canaries in the coal mines. There's no warning system. We are the ones that raise the alarms. We are the ones that cry about rights being stripped first. If you silence us, there's nobody to raise that alarm, and they can just go do whatever they want.
Though this may feel like a grim time for 2S LGBTQIA+ people in Canada, Alberta, and Edmonton, Madge, Evans, and Bennett all point to the reason why we're even able to look back at the burning of the IOS in the first place: queer resilience. The bricks on which Hirsch built the Institute back in 1919 was to make both a physical and cultural space for queerness and transgender identity. These spaces get smaller and tighter, and the people in them get quiet and more afraid. They're closet-sized, but they never really go away. And the people inside them always have each other. Leftist Rag, Zach Defoe.